Viewer discretion is advised.
In an era where you have both focus groups and computer design, you really have no excuse for a logo that looks like a cat with its brain growing outside of its head like it were Scottie Pippen. Or maybe they are styrofoam peanuts that have been attached with a hot glue gun. Even worse, this thing lasted for 17 years before they did anything about it. There's only 5 to pick from, but the obvious choice here is Mike Mularkey, whose QB cocktail of Chad Henne and Blaine Gabbert shockingly only netted him 2 wins in 2012. I mean, the dude's name is Mularkey, which literally means nonsense or drivel, and that makes perfect sense.
2 words, Blaine Gabbert. Another 2 words, Blake Bortles. The Jacksonville Jaguars rested their fate in the hands of 2 guys that sound like side characters on a Netflix spinoff about the Pirates of the Caribbean. And it cost them dearly. Yar, I'm Blaine Gabbert. And I am Blake Bortles. In 2011, the Jags took Gabbert with the 10th overall pick. The literal next pick, J.J. Watt. So not only did they miss on a future Hall of Famer, they lost him to a division rival. Watt has 17 of his 101 career sacks against the Jags. In 2012 and 2013, the Jags won just 11 games, thanks to number 11. That earned them the right to draft Blake Bortles in the 2014 NFL Draft, ahead of other options like Khalil Mack and Mike Evans, or other quarterbacks like Teddy Bridgewater or Derek Carr. I guess it could have been worse. In 2012, Blaine Gabbert threw 2 picks against the mauling Bears defense as the Jags lost a 38-pointer in front of their fans and the tarp in Jacksonville. Lance Briggs and Peanut Tillman both had 36-yard pick sixes, and this game likely convinced the Jags that Blaine was shockingly not the answer. My buddy Uchi Waneri was out there at right guard for this game. Let's see how he remembers it.
Okay, after a loss like that, what's the locker room like? I guess there's no chatter, right? It's just like, all right, let's just catch
like
up. It's like
low whispers. Let's get the out. Yeah, now there are like, for the starters, we like, yo, we getting the out of here. I'm already in the shower. Like, oh, let's get my shit on. Got his little recorder in his hand. So, Uche, got a minute? Like,
Jags fan, welcome to the pain. Urban Meyer. That's all I need to say. Your team hired Urban Meyer. You know all about him and how Shad and Tony Khan don't give a fuck about your team. But what pisses you off the most is that you dressed in clown suits and protest only to have the team bring back a name more triggering than Herb himself. Trent Baalke. Trevor Lawrence might die before he has a line in front of him. And thanks for outfitting the rest of the league with all your good players.
Jacksonville. When I think of Jacksonville, I think of geriatrics with saggy, sweaty skin slowly going into whirlpools at a retirement home. Seriously, who the fuck wanted an NFL team in Jacksonville? Ironically, the best years for the team came in their first 5 years when they made 2 conference championship games. In the 21st century, though, it's been almost nothing other than a run to the AFC Championship game in 2017. Of course, your stupid fucking franchise failed to do the world a favor by eliminating Tom Brady while there, as you gave up a 10-point fourth quarter lead. Currently, your team employs snake oil salesman Urban Meyer as head coach. Meyer has an ultra-rare medical condition where the status of his heart is directly correlated to how much money he makes. Your team will undoubtedly ruin Trevor Lawrence's career before it can even get off the ground. Lawrence seems like a good dude, but being asked to carry a 1-15 team with almost no talent is a tall task for even the best quarterbacks ever, let alone a rookie. Your mascot also looks like Chester Cheetah's gay cousin, Jacksonville Jaguars. I fucking love the name. It's catchy and memorable and obviously relatable to the city where the team plays. The issue is that the look doesn't live up to the name. Instead of a cool looking Jaguar, we essentially get Chester Cheetah's gay cousin. The sunglasses are kind of out of place, he only has a few whiskers, and he's fat as hell. Pretty big letdown overall. Rating, 4 out of 10. Jacksonville Jaguars, Mark Brunell. Brunell's time with Jacksonville is kind of underrated if you ask me. He made 3 Pro Bowls, led the league in passing yards in 1996, and made 2 conference championship games. Nobody will ever confuse him for a Hall of Famer, but he provided an expansion franchise with stability and above average production at the quarterback position for a prolonged period of time, and he deserves respect for that since it's not that easy to do. Just ask Tim Couch and David
The 2017 Jacksonville Jaguars sat 10 minutes away from the franchise's first Super Bowl. After years spent picking at the top of draft after draft and shelling out for free agents, the pieces clicked perfectly. The Jaguars found success by getting a bunch of stars to play as a team. There were the pass rushers: Yannick Ngakoue, Dante Fowler Jr., Calais Campbell, a 2017 first-team All-Pro defensive end and second-team defensive tackle. Malik Jackson and Marcel Darius manned the trenches, while linebackers Telvin Smith and Paul Posluszny cleaned everything up behind them. Posluszny in particular kept this defense going, a veteran leader making sure everyone stayed on assignment. The first and second team All-Pro corners, Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye, further solidified this group. Ramsey was arguably the star of this show, both for his physical shutdown play as well as his, let's call it, well-earned confidence. This defense was special. Few squads were on their level in any one category, let alone as a total package. Offensively, no one outrushed this team in 2017 thanks to Leonard Fournette, who gave Blake Bortles someone to lean on as he guided the offense. They became the highest scoring team in Jaguars franchise history and won their first division title in 18 years. The coach who got them there in 1999 was back too. Tom Coughlin returned to the team to oversee the roster, and their first year together worked out all right. They won their first playoff game in a decade, then stunned Pittsburgh in a shootout where the Jaguars never trailed, and found themselves in their first AFC championship since 2000. Armed with enough talent to threaten the league for years to come, these Jaguars sat moments away from the franchise's first Super Bowl appearance. Or, and it pains me to say this, maybe not. Blake Bortles outplayed Tom Brady. Dante Fowler Jr. harassed the living legend. Jacksonville's defense made New England's run game non-existent. The first 50 minutes of that AFC Championship game couldn't have gone better for the Jaguars. They led 20-10, and neither team showed any sign that the outcome would change. What looked like the final nail in New England's coffin came early in the fourth. Desperate, the Patriots went into their bag of tricks, which beautifully set up Dion Lewis behind a bulldozer of blockers. But Miles Jack almost casually came in from the right and forced a fumble, recovered the fumble, and had a clear path to the end zone. One problem: the referees blew their whistles. Yes, they said he had the ball, but also that Jack was down. What could have just as easily been ruled 7 points for Jacksonville instead led to a Jags 3-and-out. A 10-point lead with this defense still felt solid though, especially after Marcel Darius sacked Brady, which led to a 3rd and 18. But right here, Danny Amendola proved he's more than just a fun name to say. His 21-yard reception turned the tide. 4 plays later, he finished the drive, cutting the Jags' lead to 3. With 5 minutes to play, Amendola's 20-yard punt return set New England up at Jacksonville's 30, and once again, Brady found Amendola, whose amazing toe tapper put the Pats up 4. And after sputtering the entire fourth quarter, Jacksonville's offense couldn't mount a comeback of their own. They failed to convert on 4th down, the defense failed to corral Dion Lewis as he iced the game, and instead of an unexpected victory, the Jaguars' improbable fourth quarter collapse became official. Jacksonville made some mental errors, at times tried to protect their lead too much, but the nearly 10-point underdogs would have needed perfection against the Patriots. That defeat, while hard to swallow, still showed the evolution of this team, a result they could build upon, especially considering Jacksonville's young roster. Strengthening, or at least maintaining that roster, was exactly why they brought Coughlin into the mix. While David Caldwell kept the general manager position he'd held since 2013, Coughlin's title of Executive Vice President of Football Operations really just meant he got the final word with this roster. But the 2018 offseason came with a couple head scratchers. First up, Bortles. His time with the Jags had been troublingly inconsistent for a top 3 pick. But back in 2017, the Jags had picked up his 5th-year option in a way that guaranteed he'd stick around for 2018. Instead of leaving it at that, this offseason, Jacksonville tacked on a 3-year extension. Granted, as Bill Barnwell pointed out, that move itself wasn't necessarily a bad one, it just raised questions about Jacksonville's future plans for the position. As for Bortles' pass catchers, Coughlin elected to re-sign Marquise Lee, a serviceable receiver, but it came at the expense of Allen Robinson. Robinson had already proven capable of playing as one of the league's best. Granted, he tore his ACL to start 2017 and would cost a little more than Lee, but it's not like this team had shied away from spending elsewhere. Now, one move that Coughlin didn't get a say in came when Posluszny retired, after the first winning season of his 11-year career. Telvin Smith's speech at the retirement ceremony showed just how much the linebacker meant to the Jaguars. As the team prepared for the 2018 season, the defense continued to focus on the guy they needed to replace, specifically the leadership role. Although, right here, Fowler and Ngakoue likely weren't asking, what would Paul do? Their post-practice altercation that August became even worse when Ramsey got involved and targeted the media filming the incident. He went so far as to imply that by releasing the video, the Jags would go to war with the reporters. Jacksonville suspended Ramsey and Fowler for 1 week each, but this sparked an eventful week and year for the Jags all-pro cornerback, who kind of became the headliner of Jacksonville's woes. In the midst of his suspension, GQ published an interview they'd done with Ramsey, where, among many topics, he rattled off his thoughts on some of the league's quarterbacks. Most of the focus fell on the jabs. Matt Ryan, overrated. Josh Allen, trash. Eli and Roethlisberger, only good because of their receivers. Fortunately, when the season began, Ramsey didn't have to eat his words immediately. Jacksonville jumped out to a 3-1 start, which included a win over the Giants, where the defense got a pick 6 out of Manning. They followed that with some convincing payback against New England. The lone loss in that first month also was due to an offense without Fournette, who injured his hamstring in week 1, the start to his own eventful season, which we'll get to. But the wheels got wobbly in week 5, with 5 turnovers from Bortles. Then they completely fell off a week later against Dallas. Following the blowout, defenders mentioned guys being unsure on their assignments, but they also viewed it as a blip, something that this team could correct. Well, they didn't. Those 2 losses sparked a 7-game losing streak. And while the defense attempted to figure things out, they'd have to do so without Dante Fowler Jr. The Jaguars shipped the former 3rd overall pick off to the Rams, getting ahead of an inevitable departure that would have come in free agency. In the midst of Jacksonville's losing streak, Ramsey once again comfortably spoke his mind, hinting at his future also being elsewhere. A week later, Adam Schefter added to that topic, using some extremely careful phrasing to report Ramsey could be on the move in the offseason. And a week after that, Fournette swung the spotlight away from Ramsey by swinging his fist at the Bills' Shaq Lawson. He left the bench to get involved in a brawl, so an ejection turned into a suspension, which capped off the losing streak. So Jacksonville had one star hinting at leaving, and another whose actions convinced Coughlin to void the remaining guaranteed money in his contract. The Jaguars plummeted to a 5-win season after being moments away from the Super Bowl. Following their Week 17 loss, Coughlin put Fournette on blast because he and fellow running back TJ Yeldon spent most of the game on the bench away from their teammates. That same day, Jaguars owner Shad Khan said he wouldn't break up the band, but made it clear that 2018 necessitated improvement. Coughlin heard that and got to work. First, a meeting with Fournette that actually, allegedly, went well. After they patched things up, Coughlin got out the sledgehammer. Some minor moves cleared a little bit of cap space, but with less than $3 million to work with at the start of free agency, Coughlin needed to break the party up. First, Malik Jackson. Jacksonville cut ties with the defensive tackle halfway through a 6-year deal, saving $11 million by saying farewell to one of their 6 defensive Pro Bowlers from 2017. Now, why did the Jaguars need that cap space? 3 words: Big Nick Foles. Jacksonville handed out the largest contract in franchise history to the recent Super Bowl MVP. Signing Foles sealed Bortles' fate. His release came after 2018, where Bortles finished as one of the worst passers in the league. But also before the QB could play a single snap of that 3-year extension Jacksonville gave him 1 year earlier. The move came with a good amount of dead money, further justifying the questions around the contract in the first place. Coughlin, though, said he'd do it all the same way. Then again, I can't really picture Coughlin feeling regret too often. This is the same guy who called out 2 of the defensive stars for skipping voluntary practices. Admittedly, Coughlin didn't call out Ramsey and Smith by name, but since they were the only 2 players not in attendance, folks connected the dots. The NFL, on behalf of the Players Association, quickly warned the Jaguars about comments like this. Smith responded a few weeks later by announcing that wouldn't be the only football activities he'd miss. The linebacker stepped away from the team without even telling Jacksonville first. Ramsey, though, was great at communicating. He said the team knew that without a new deal, the corner wouldn't be there. And when talking about that new deal, Ramsey felt strongly about his self-worth. So strongly that Ramsey tied it into his training camp entrance. It's worth noting that Adidas sponsored this bit, meaning Ramsey got paid while asking to get paid. Genius. The Jaguars, though, weren't budging. They told Ramsey's agent that no extension would come. It wasn't just the corner, though. Ngakoue, Jacksonville's star defensive end, also looked to get a new contract. But when he declined the Jaguars' initial offer, Coughlin abruptly broke off negotiations. That led to the pass rusher holding out during training camp, a move that he likely wished had been brought to you by Adidas. After an offseason full of headlines, Jacksonville likely appreciated the distraction that just playing football can offer. In the first quarter of Week 1, Foles suffered a broken clavicle. In Week 2, Ramsey got in a sideline altercation with head coach Doug Marrone. The very next day, Ramsey told the Jaguars that he wanted to be traded. That request got leaked against Ramsey's wishes, who had hoped to not be a distraction to the team. But a few days after that, a conversation came out that ruined any chance of that happening. During a podcast interview, Ramsey shared that his time with the team was done. That following Week 2, some disrespectful things were said to him by the organization. He made it clear that he had no issues with his teammates, the fans, even the coaches. It all had to do with the front office. Ramsey played in Week 3, hugged some teammates and coaches, and then was gone. First, reports said he had the flu. Then a back injury kept him out. And on September 25th, he left the team for the birth of his daughter. A move that would allow him to be away as long as he wanted without consequence. It ended up being 3 weeks. Jacksonville found a trade partner in the Rams. And 5 days after the trade, the all-pro corner was playing football again. But back in Jacksonville, things went further south on and off the field. While Jacksonville benched their QB with a record contract for a mustachioed rookie, the Jags front office got thrown under a player-driven bus. The NFLPA put out a statement that warned players about signing with Jacksonville. The Players Association had won a grievance filed against Jacksonville over the team's repeated violations of the collective bargaining agreement. They had required players to use the team facilities for rehab and medical needs, then fined players who elected not to. In one specific case, the team fined Fowler 25 times, totaling over $700,000. The NFLPA's statement added that 25% of all the grievances filed by players over the previous 2 years had been against Jacksonville. Oh, Coughlin, you punishment-loving idiot. It shouldn't be too surprising from the man who made his players practice in the same Florida heat that was killing livestock, or whom Hall of Famers openly admitted to hating. 2 days after the report came out, Coughlin, for the second time, left the Jaguars in disgrace. By now, Jacksonville couldn't hide from the issues that had burrowed deep into this team. far quicker than anyone could have expected, they were back to rebuilding. They said farewell to Marcel Darius, the guy who almost single-handedly fixed Jacksonville's run defense. Next, Calais Campbell went to Baltimore for a 5th-round pick. In just 3 seasons, Campbell earned the 4th most sacks in team history, including the single-season franchise record. The Jags flipped A.J. Boye for another 4th-rounder, leaving just a pair of stars who'd had their own issues with the franchise. Ngakoue had started the offseason by making his intentions pretty clear, but Jacksonville franchised him regardless. With no intention of signing, Ngakoue took his frustrations to Twitter, where he got in a back and forth with the owner's son, who he called a clown. Eventually, the last remaining Pro Bowler from 2017 got his wish via trade to Minnesota. And the very next day, the Jaguars called it quits with Fournette. In a fairly surprising move, they released the former 4th overall pick, committing to some slightly less experienced runners. In just 2.5 years, this team hit a new low following the nearly total roster overhaul. But these depths also allow hope to grow. A new coach coming in, a new generational quarterback on the horizon, an easy way to forget how far the Jaguars collapsed. They'd drafted, traded, used free agency to assemble an undeniably absurd defense plus a devastating ground game. They earned a genuine, although unexpected, chance to win it all. But when they went down, they committed to going down. While in the end, they just had the one season of greatness, holy shit, was that 1 year fun.